what we choose to do is really going to determine.
Welcome to Climate Channel News and Current Affairs. Today I have with me Mr. Nathaniel Smith, who is a parliament member of Toronto. He is a parliament member of basically BCS East York, the important area of Toronto City. And Mr. Nathaniel, he is running for two term.
This will be I'm in my third term now.
Third term now.
Yeah.
And okay, best wishes for you. Now we are going to talking about your leadership. I know you are running for Liberal Party of Ontario leadership. How is going it?
So we are in an exploratory phase because there's no official race underway just yet. So I've been traveling since October. I've traveled started in Sudbury, Thunder Bay. I did a northern tour of Kenora, Sioux Lookout, Dryden. I've been all over southwestern Ontario, from Niagara to Kitchener, Waterloo to Windsor, and everywhere in between. We've done an eastern tour to Brockville. I've been on Zoom calls all across the province as well, which has been a little bit easier to reach every corner of the province. And we had a great convention in Hamilton and really made a number of positive changes for our party. And now I'm back on the road. So I'm back to Northern Ontario, back to Southwestern Ontario. And the goal here really is to build our Liberal Party to every corner of the province again. And hopefully we're in a place when the race officially opens up sometime maybe next month or the month after, we'll see. The new executive is working on that. We'll be in a position to officially launch. Right now, we're really focused on, can we build the kind of serious team, credible team in every corner of the province that this party deserves and that the province deserves?
Maybe it is public question. You are working for federal government. You are a member of parliament 3 times.
Yeah.
Why you are going to Ontario, provincial level? Why you are working for provincial level?
Yeah, people have wondered, am I taking a step down? But
I don't want to say it is a step down. It is another area of politics.
And it comes back to that core question. How does one make the biggest difference with the time that one has? My parents were both teachers, and my first experience in politics was actually at the provincial level. It was in the Harris years, and I saw, for better and in that case worse, the difference that politics can make. Well, fast forward to 10 years ago, and I had been practicing law. I'd studied politics and constitutional law for a long time, and Justin Trudeau came along. We had a very frustrating conservative majority government. We had a Liberal Party that was in 3rd place in need of that generational serious renewal. And Trudeau called for doing politics differently. He called for younger people to get involved in politics. He called for politics that said, you don't always have to agree with the party. You're there to represent your community in the strongest way possible. And I was 29 at the time when I was thinking about running the nomination. I thought, this is the best way that I can make a difference, help to rebuild the Liberal Party, including here in Beaches, East York, and to really make a positive difference in federal politics. Now, talk about today. All of the parallels that drew me to politics in the first place and federal politics actually apply at the provincial level. We have a Liberal Party in 3rd place in need of that serious renewal, and we have a very frustrating conservative majority government that isn't delivering on healthcare, isn't delivering on education, isn't delivering affordable housing. The big picture challenges that we face here in the province of Ontario, our government is not delivering on. And so that core question, how does one make the biggest difference? Find me a bigger difference.
Okay, just I can refer you from your talking. Ontario is going down. We have seen a last 2 election result. It is unexpected and it is unwanted result. What is your specific plan? How you can build the Ontario for Liberals? How you can rebuild Ontario for the people?
A few different ways, and I think it is back to basics in many ways. There is no substitute for the hard work. It's why I've been traveling the province. There's no substitute for the hard work of building in every corner of this province, finding the Liberal members to really engage them in volunteerism, because what we've seen over the last 10 years at the provincial level is many staffers were doing the work of traditional volunteer work, and volunteerism atrophied in our party. And we need to remind everyone all across this province that politics, for better and for worse, and sometimes there are faults to politics, politics is the most important way we make a difference in the lives of those around us. And so I have to remind everyone that if you want better from your politics, the answer is participation. So that's one. Two, we have to speak to people where they're at. So whether it is you're in Northern Ontario, Southwestern Ontario, here in Toronto, people don't have family doctors. 2 million Ontarians don't have access to a family doctor. Mental health and addictions are impacting our communities up and down. Whether it's the inability to afford a house for young Canadians or on people all across this province. Whether it is environmental protections. You see a government that is moving backwards on environmental protections, and that is an issue that young people in particular are demanding action on. So you run down the list. Do they have a strong economic agenda? No. Do they have a strong healthcare agenda? No. Do they have any education agenda? No. On the core issues of the day that impact our daily lives, we as Liberals need to be there and speak to them. And then lastly, I would say, we can't just be the not Doug Ford party. We tried that. Didn't work. Doug Ford can swallow a bee. He can give himself a cheap haircut. There's a certain likability to him. We have to really speak to people when it comes to values. What does the Liberal Party stand for? And for me, why did I join the Liberal Party? It's because I care about seriousness and competence in government. I care about smart government. I care about fair and compassionate government for those in need. And I care about delivering on those values with honesty and integrity. And if we can speak to those values of competence, compassion, and integrity, I think we'll be very successful as a Liberal Party.
Unfortunately, when you are running as a leader of Ontario, at times a number of people criticize about healthcare, about inflation, the federal government. How you face this criticism as a leader, new leader?
Well, one, I would say I'm proud of many things that we've delivered as a federal Liberal government. There are hundreds of thousands of kids that aren't in poverty today because of our federal Liberal government. At the New Year's levy we hosted with other elected officials here in Beaches, East York, I had a woman come up to me and say, I used to pay $3,600 a month in childcare for my 2 kids. I'm now paying $1,600 a month, and that's because of your government. And so on core affordability issues, and we're delivering on dental care right now, but you run down the list and there's been a ton of progress. You think we're on the climate change channel. You look at the progress we've made on climate change. Yeah. Whether it is slashing methane emissions, whether it is investing in public transit, whether it is the strong price on pollution, whether it is phasing out coal-fired electricity all across this country.
Do you think current budget will help to move forward?
There's no question. You had the David Suzuki Foundation, Clean Energy Canada, the Climate Institute. You had all of these actors, the Pembina Institute. You had all these actors who care about climate that came out saying, this is a really strong budget that is going to deliver a clean future, and recognizing this isn't just about protecting our planet, it's also about creating clean jobs today, and it's about making sure that we're reducing people's home energy bills. So we can deliver affordability, create jobs, and also protect the planet at the same time with the right policy mix. And there was $21 new billion spending specifically to encourage and incentivize job creation in the clean economy. So you run down the list, and actually there's an area where, has the federal government been perfect? No. More can be done on housing. More can be done on lifting people out of poverty who are people with disabilities. So there's more unquestionably that can be done. I was just speaking to people, a woman involved in, she's the special interlocutor around unmarked graves, and a core element of reconciliation. There's still more work to be done to lift people up all across this country, including Indigenous people. But there's also been a ton of progress. And so I think I can point to the fact that we have a very strong record at the federal level. I can also point to the fact that I haven't always agreed with the government. And so I've always been a backbencher, and I have a reputation for being more independent-minded, being a bit more thoughtful, I like to think, in politics. And I'm going to bring those same values and
sometimes
ideas to
people like this type of people who are thinking independently.
Well, I think overwhelmingly, do people trust in politics? Not enough, I would say, right? Not enough. And why is that? Because sometimes we revert to the same talking points. We recite the same canned speeches that we're given to recite, and people vote how we're told to vote. I have not done that over my 7.5 years in politics. Every speech I've ever given in politics is one I've written myself. Every vote I've taken has been one that I've considered carefully, including with the input from constituents, including with the input from experts. I haven't always agreed with the party. And overwhelmingly, what do I want out of politics? I think it's the same what most people want out of politics. You're going to have someone who represents you, who's going to tell it like it is. You aren't going to agree with everything that one party does. You're not going to agree with everything that your representative does. But collectively, do you think this person is responsible, is competent, is compassionate, carries themselves with honesty and integrity? And those are the values I want to see in my politics, and I hope those are the values that I've carried myself with over these last 7.5 years.
You are working for a citizen of Ontario as well as the Liberal Party members. Do you think you need the community people like Bangladeshi Canadians, like others community people, to help you to work together?
Unquestionably, yes. So my politics, the success of my politics, has really depended upon me being strongly invested in our community. And whether it is through funding supports, whether it's Canada Summer Jobs, whether it is funding supports through the Disability and Accessibility Fund, whether it is funding supports through supports for seniors through New Horizons. Supporting local organizations, including in the Bangladeshi community, has been really important. But also just in my own politics, we've got Eid prayer coming up, and I've attended Eid prayer for now, I think, going on 10 years in the community. I've just been, if I'm going to represent a community as strong and as vibrant as this one, I have to be involved and active in the community. And that's actually the challenge. It's both the, I'm optimistic about it, but it's also the challenge of representing a province. There are so many communities, and I've spent 7.5 to 10 years now between elected office and seeking elected office here, of really being involved and really being community minded. I need to take the exact same approach, but it's a challenge because in a very short period of time, I have to try to get as many places as I can and build relationships, because in my view, that trust and really valuable politics depends upon those really personal relationships. So yeah, our Bangladeshi community has been incredibly impactful in my own politics. I think there's a huge opportunity for the Bangladeshi community all across this province to play an instrumental role in the leadership. But it's not just the Bangladeshi community. It's, you know, we have a really vibrant Tamil community in Scarborough. We have a very vibrant Sikh community across the GTA. We have a very vibrant Ismaili community, and in Beaches, East York and beyond, we have a vibrant Chinese community, and so much more. And so this Friday, I'll be at a Nepalese New Year celebration. There's so many communities, and for me, it's really about reflecting on how can I be the best advocate and build relationships across all communities, whether it's the Jewish community, whether it is our Bangladeshi community, Pakistani Muslim community, and so much more. So yeah, it's hard though, because you've got to really focus on building personal relationships at the same time as you don't have that much time to get across the province, and so it's been I call it connection to all communities. I call it relentless team building. We're in the business of building the strongest, biggest team we can.
In this situation, do you think the Bangladeshi community need more support for you? And another way, the Bangladeshi young are rising.
Yeah,
and Bangladeshi community, you have to must say vibrant community, your area and others area, near area. Do you think Bangladeshi young need to more involved in politics, and how can you help to build this network for Bangladeshi community?
So I'd say a few things. One, I've been lucky to be the chair of the Canada-Bangladesh Friendship Group since 2015. I've recently stepped down in order to pursue this provincial leadership role. But we sat down at one point and we said, what are our objectives to really properly represent the Bangladeshi community? One is, many people were asking, recognize International Mother Language Day officially on behalf of the federal government. So there's a bill in Parliament that we're passing, we're going to get that done. And I was one of the first in Parliament to raise my voice for Rohingya refugees. Why? Because I had a constituency in the Bangladeshi community that was calling for that action and to be the best representative I could.
As well as you was a chairman of Bangladesh caucus in Canadian Federal Parliament.
Yeah, well, as much as we can have a Bangladesh caucus without Bangladesh MPs, but anyone who represented a strong Bangladeshi constituency was invited to be a participant in this friendship group. And so we delivered as a government to support Bangladesh and to support Rohingya refugees. On trade, we've encouraged, and it was only actually until the conflict with China and where China weaponized trade against us that there was a much more of a receptiveness from the International Trade Minister on encouraging and promoting trade with Bangladesh. And lastly, SDS, the Student Direct Stream. The change hasn't been made yet, but I've spoken directly with the Minister about ensuring that we are treated equally.
It is another strong question.
Yes.
You was a chairperson of Bangladesh caucus, and you are running 3 times a area where live in lots of Bangladeshi.
Yes.
How you work for the student? How can easily come a student from Bangladesh like India and others?
Yeah, exactly.
We are not getting same facilities.
It's going to happen though. So the minister hasn't. So it's supposed to happen in the fall. I've spoken with the minister, but this was one of my objectives. I mentioned a few objectives which we've delivered on. This was one objective which is not yet delivered on, but is going to be delivered on. The Minister Fraser and I have discussed this directly, and I was expecting an announcement in the fall. We're obviously past the fall, so we as a caucus need to revisit this and encourage action. I'm told that it's a matter of time now, and it's not a question of if, it's a question of when. But unquestionably, Bangladesh should be treated the same as Pakistan should be treated as other countries in the area. Of course, that's obviously true. I would say on engaging young people, because obviously delivering on issues for young people is a big part of that, including the student direct stream. But I would also say just broadly, speaking to issues that matter to young people, so whether it is education, whether it is protecting the environment, whether it is delivering on affordability for young people, especially as it relates to housing. Anyone under the age of 35, if you're not talking about housing affordability, you shouldn't be in this business. If you don't in this business. So I think meeting young people where they're at is really important on the issues they care about. The other thing is just to connect the issues they care about to politics. So I have young people who are Bangladeshi who work in my constituency office. Young Bangladeshi Canadians have been part of our volunteer summer liberal internship program and volunteering. So it's been a big part of our politics, but I would also say those are people who are active and care about politics already.
But we have to get some space for them.
Yeah, and well, there is. Unquestionably, there already is. My point is you have to get into schools and you have to get into universities and you have to get in front of young people and say, you might not like partisan politics. You might not like how it plays out. But here, if you care about housing affordability, if you can't buy a home, it tracks back to politics and exclusionary zoning and the fact we're not investing in building homes. If you care about protecting the environment, no one person can do this on their own. It tracks back to politics. If you want to make sure that every one of your classmates is well fed, it tracks back to politics.
Need to more connect with community and community issues.
And it's
before the politics.
Yeah, and to show them that there are faults to politics. There are the attack ads and the smears and the rote talking points and all of that. We can express our frustrations with our current political system, but that doesn't mean that politics isn't still the place where all the action happens. And if you don't participate, politics still goes on with or without you.
Yeah.
And so we have to remind young people that participation is the answer. Of any issue, you pick an issue, if you care about it, politics is the answer to that issue, and the only answer to that is participation. So there are specific issues to the Bangladeshi community, there are no question. My own experience, though, is the Bangladeshi community cares about the very same things that every other community cares about, which is affordability, which is making sure their kids are better off than they are, and making sure that you can get around the city, you can live in the city, and you can get around the city. And it's the same core issues that matter to the Bangladeshi community, to the Christian community, to it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what. Everyone cares about the same issues at the end of the day, and we have so much more in common. Now there are specific issues to the Bangladeshi community around International Mother Language Day, the connection to Bangladesh with Rohingya refugees, and trade and SDS, and those are all issues that I work closely on.
Yeah, I can about the related issue. I think Liberal Association of Bangladeshi Canadians, a group of Bangladeshi Canadians, a team of Bangladeshi Canadians who are working to build the Bangladeshi Canadian in mainstream politics, as well as they are working for Liberal Party. Not only your area, not only our area, they are working all over the Ontario. How you think about the issue? How can it more develop?
So organization, this gets back to basics. We can talk about ideas, we can talk about the values we have as Liberals, we can talk about the need to travel the province. At the end of the day, we are going to be successful if we can build a very strong, serious team everywhere. And as part of that, it really comes back to basics on organization. We need volunteers, we need members, and we need people who are strong contributing members to our party if we're going to see our party succeed. And 10 years ago, we did this with our federal party. And now's the time to do it with our provincial party. And so the Liberal Association of Bangladeshi Canadians and any other organization that is focused on liberal values, rebuilding the Liberal Party, and engaging not only in Beaches East York, but in London, in Windsor, all across the GTA, and everywhere, and engaging Bangladeshi Canadians in politics, both in Ontario and across the country, it's critical. These are exactly the organizations that we need to rebuild our party successfully.
Thank you very much. Just we are going back again, issue of trade, Bangladesh, Canada trade. We have a big gap between Bangladesh and Canada, trade gap. as a experienced with Bangladeshi, what do you think? How can we build the Bangladesh-Canadian business relationship or Bangladesh-Canadian political relationship?
Well, one, I think I have long thought the Prime Minister should visit Bangladesh, for example, and I've encouraged him and his office to do just that on more than one occasion. So that's part of it. That's not the only part of it. I think we also have to empower Canadian businesses. I've met with the canola producers, for example, and said, look, we're doing 10 times the business in Pakistan that we're doing in Bangladesh, and we're doing much more business in China. At the end of the day, there's a much more solid, stable ally in Bangladesh here to do business with, and it makes eminent sense that we would ensure we increase our trade on the canola side. Now, that would probably require a crushing facility in Bangladesh to make it happen, so there are some mechanics that are required on the Bangladeshi side, but still there's a huge opportunity there. Similarly, when you look at whether it's pharmaceuticals, whether it's in textiles, there are huge opportunities to increase trade. It does take individual entrepreneurship to really unlock that kind of trade, and I know there are so many entrepreneurial Bangladeshi Canadians who have businesses in Bangladesh, businesses here in Canada, family in both places. I've even met MPs in Bangladesh who have families here and connected. There are so many common connections between our two countries. I think we just have to take that on as a country, but I would also say, and what I'm really interested in provincially, provinces have a lot to say on this front too. So when you look at Saskatchewan sends trade delegations to Bangladesh, and they have incredible trade with Bangladesh, particularly in the pulses. So if I was Premier, for example, one would be able to tap into those relationships and really have a trade focus even there and say, as part of our economic agenda, we're going to continue to export goods, and Bangladesh is going to continue to be a powerful ally. And I do think, it's interesting, I think as liberals, we have to speak the language of fairness and compassion and deliver on homelessness, deliver poverty reduction, there's no question about it. We also have to have a very strong economic agenda and fiscal discipline, and trade should loom very large in that economic picture.
Canada has a shortage of skilled worker, many areas. In Bangladesh, lots of skilled workers, skilled immigrants are there. How can you just invite the skilled Bangladeshi to Canada?
It's not specific to one country in this case. The problem you're identifying is a real one, but it's not a problem that only Bangladesh would solve. It's a problem that is acute to Canada in terms of our labor force shortage in a number of different areas. If we want to pick on housing just as an example, but we can pick on the healthcare system too, we have a labor force challenge all across this country on really big, important issues. And are we going to solve it by just focusing on one country? No. We should have a smart immigration policy that embraces people from all countries. Now, I will say, when you look at the numbers, you ought to make sure that you aren't preferencing one country over another, and you ought to make sure there's equality between countries in this regard. And obviously, a country like Bangladesh, where there is such a strong connection and friendship, it makes eminent sense that you would say, we're going to have Bangladesh and we're going to have people coming from all across this country, all across this world, but we're also going to make sure that there's certain countries where we have a deep relationship with, that we're going to make sure that there are open doors. But I would say, principally, the focus has to be, from a Canadian perspective, the focus has to be, where are there shortages in skilled workers, in what regions, and what demographics, and what trades, and how do we fill those based on skilled workers across the globe. And it's you do see some countries, so for example, when you look at the caregiver pathway, the Philippines takes advantage of that in a really significant, serious way. So when it comes to Bangladesh, for example, one would have to sit down and say, whether it's Bangladesh, whether it is India, name your country, what are the skill sets coming out of institutions in Bangladesh that best match the skill sets we need here in Canada, and how do we encourage people to come, and not only come to Canada, how do we encourage people to then go to the places that we need them to go. So there's a Northern Ontario immigration pilot that's been extended that Sean Fraser's been a part of. There's obviously an Atlantic pilot in that regard as well. But how do we make sure that respecting people's rights of mobility, but you're also encouraging people to move to, stay in, live in, and raise families in the places where we desperately need them. So when you look at, for example, the lack of nurses or the lack of access to primary care teams, well, that's an issue that can in part be solved by bringing people in and making sure that the the training that people are doing to go from being a nurse in Bangladesh to being a nurse in Canada, one is able to do the conversion courses in Bangladesh as much as possible before they get here. There's smart little tweaks that you can do to those systems. But at the end of the day, we don't just want people to be in Toronto, we want people to be in rural areas, in northern areas. And so there has to be an active conversation about how do we encourage people, not just from Bangladesh, but from everywhere to come, and then to make sure they live and raise families in the places we need them.
Okay, thank you for this area. Just we are the last part.
Yeah, sure.
You are very sympathized with climate change. I am also, you know,
Climate
our
change
channel is
yeah.
Climate Channel. And I want to thank the Canadian government. They are working a lot for climate change, as well as they are working a lot for refugees who are suffering all
Yeah.
over the world.
Yeah.
Canada always inviting the refugee who are affected. You know me, Bangladesh is the more vulnerable country for climate change.
Yes.
Lots of climate refugee are there. If I don't want to say like this, why if you invite another refugee, why you not invite the climate change refugee? Climate change refugee is a big issue all over the world.
Yep.
It is a very serious issue for Bangladesh. My question is, if you a premier, if you or you as a leader, are you thinking about inviting climate refugee to Canada?
So the Premier would have very little to say around refugee policy because it does fall squarely
Government
within
policy.
federal jurisdiction. But speaking now at the federal level, so we can talk about refugee policy. The policy squarely is we set targets and so of the global target, we have a very high target now of 50,000 plus refugees that we want to bring into this country. And look, there's not only a compassionate angle to this, there's obviously, we talk about skilled workers, we talk about you look at the history of the refugee intake programs that this country has had, and it's been net benefit to this country. So there's a reason to defend strong refugee policies. Having said that, we do not determine who is and isn't a refugee. So it is ultimately the UNHCR that determines who is and isn't a refugee. And look, I don't want to dismiss the notion that there are going to be climate refugees. And so you look at the risk that Bangladesh is at when you look at rising sea levels and unchecked climate change, there is a massive risk there. We are not at a place yet, though, where I think anyone in Bangladesh is going to be able to attend at a UNHCR camp and say, I'm a climate refugee and I need to come to Canada. And so that conversation may develop as far as it goes, but it would be our international partners that determine who refugees are. Then we have a queue here in Canada, we have our targets that we bring in, and we wouldn't generally, now there are certain acute issues that do arise, Afghanistan, Syria, Ukraine, and so there are certain acute issues that do arise that then can set certain priorities over and above the normal queue. But generally speaking, you would have your typical queue, and it would be based on UNHCR assessments of who is and who isn't a refugee.
Just I want to say not only the Bangladesh, I want to say how the Canadian government will just recognize the climate refugee. If you think climate refugee a issue, you can invite them. It is not only for Bangladesh, it may be India and it may be Caribbean refugee.
But you do need
you have to think about climate refugee.
Yeah, but you do need an international partner to make those determinations ultimately, right? So I think the conversation really ought to be at the UNHCR level to say, we care, we recognize the reality of climate change, we recognize the real risks around climate change. Same, I've got a bill in Parliament right now about recognizing pandemic risks and reducing those pandemic risks. These are major existential challenges, and if we don't address them head on now with urgency, we're going to have lasting consequences down the road. Now, when it comes to climate refugees, it really is a conversation with the UNHCR to say, how are we going to put a process in place where people are able to be accepted and legitimately accepted and registered as climate refugees? And what does that process look like? What's the definition? What is the assessment of it? Who is doing the assessing? But I think there's an active conversation that needs to be had there, because unchecked climate change, and we aren't yet in a place where the world is doing enough to check the worst of climate change. And we are going to be in a situation with rising sea levels where certain countries, particularly island nations, but also coastal nations, are going to be deeply and negatively impacted.
Okay, my issue is I born in Bangladesh, who is vulnerable for climate change.
Yeah.
I live in Canada, who is sympathize for climate change.
Yes.
Okay, do you have any suggestion for Bangladeshi Canadians how they adopt the Canadian mainstream? And do you have any suggestion, just any desire for leadership? It is last.
Well,
First one is, do you have any suggestion for Bangladeshi community to adopt mainstream?
to adopt mainstream.
Adopt mean just maybe one Bangladeshi candidate fight for MPs.
Oh, I
fight
see.
for,
Yeah, okay. So, look, we have, there's a Bangladeshi MPP here in Ontario, in Scarborough
Yeah,
Southwest. We do not have a Bangladeshi member of parliament. I hope if I'm successful in this race for the provincial leadership, when it opens up, and when there is ultimately a nomination here federally, whether because I'm successful in a provincial race or because I'm stepping out of federal politics if I'm unsuccessful, and I'm not going to run federally regardless.
Okay.
I'm committed all in on the province, or I'm going to take a bit of a break from politics. Either way, when I step away from this role, there's going to be a nomination. I have a young staffer in my office, Tanvir, who I think would be an incredible member of parliament. There are others who I've met in the community, younger people, and I think we ought to be encouraging young people in the Bangladeshi community to think about politics and think about running for politics. I really do think it is a huge way that people can represent their community, but also represent the entire community in Beaches East York or in Scarborough Southwest. And there's a huge opportunity here in Beaches East York to do just that. So I'm optimistic that we'll be in a place where we're going to have in the coming years, based on my own experience, I can say.
Best wishes for you.
Yeah.
We want to see you are a leader of Ontario.
Yeah, thanks very much.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Any other
And then we want to
suggestion
see
for vote?
Well, just and we want to see. So I really appreciate you saying you want to see me as the Ontario Liberal Party leader. I would similarly say young people in the Bangladeshi community should be thinking about volunteering for politics and getting involved so they can at some point run for office. I ran when I was a student at Queen's. I ran for city council and I lost miserably. Okay, I learned everything not to do, and it was a great experience in politics. I was endorsed by the local papers, but I spent $300 and I got 300 votes, and I lost miserably. And that experience taught me a lot. And when I went to do it again at the age of 29, running a nomination, I was very successful. But it was that involvement in politics, learning for better and worse, what works, what doesn't. And you know what the lesson ultimately is? Be honest and be very community-minded. And if you're in it for the best interests of other people, you're gonna find great success in politics.
Thank you. Do you have any thing about you want to say for the Ontario
the leadership?
About leadership?
Yeah, so we're at a place where we get to decide how we build and rebuild this Ontario Liberal Party. And we get to decide that in one really simple way: participation. So it is free to become a member of the Ontario Liberal Party. It is free to participate and vote for the next leader. And so if you are interested in getting involved, if you think we deserve better in our politics as I do, if you want to see that kind of competence and seriousness, compassion, fairness, and integrity and honesty in our politics as I do, then go online, go to meetnate.ca, and you can figure out what we're up to. But you can also go to the Ontario Liberal Party website, become a member for free, and then vote in the leadership and get involved, because your say and your involvement is going to dictate how successful this party ultimately is and how successful the province ultimately is.
Thank you, Nathaniel Smith. Just come to us. And Climate Channel always with him who are working for community, who are working for climate change. You are the deaf people
Thanks
who
very much.
are working for both. Best wishes.
Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Yeah.